that's sent out of Maury, the Maury Service Authority water plant is not built. That is, we have a 30% loss of water in the region that comes out of the plant. That's not sustainable. These significant cost upgrades that are coming at us, the jail, the water plant, and the high school, we're going to come up with some very creative thinking on how to solve these economic problems coming at us. I wish I had a magic bullet to fix all of this. We've endured the past. We have a strong community. I'm sure we'll overcome, but I see some sacrifices coming at us that we're going to have to make. Thank you.
All right, I think I can hit on two important issues in 2 minutes, so bear with me. First and foremost, the City of Lexington and our regional partners need to continue to work together responsibly and cooperatively. None of the challenges that Chuck just mentioned can be solved by one local government entity. Whether it is modernizing the jails to get rid of the overcrowding, whether it is enhancing the high school campus, whether it is remodeling and modernizing the wastewater treatment plant. We need a new Department of Social Services, and we've needed that for decades. What about the fact that when you call 911 around here, it might take an ambulance 25 minutes to get there? That's inexcusable in 2022, but the solution to those challenges will be regional. None of us can solve those challenges by ourselves. The second important issue is something that I have prioritized, and it's something that Ms. Berry-Reck hit on, engaging the public. Since I've been on City Council, we had hundreds of citizens participate in our strategic planning process. We had hundreds of citizens participate in the comprehensive plan process that the Planning Commission spearheaded. During COVID, we had virtual meetings, yet you know what? We had 5 hours of public comment. The citizens in Lexington were engaged on hot topics, and that made me excited. As we came out of COVID, we listened to the public as a city council. We now meet at 7 p.m. instead of 8 p.m. We moved our meetings to the county administration building because they have top-notch audio and visual technology that we now take advantage of for planning commission and for city council meetings. And of course, we stream all of our meetings live on YouTube, and we archive them on YouTube so everyone can stay informed. And 2 final points. Our clerk of council takes the best minutes. So even if you miss that meeting, you can read the minutes and know what we did. And she sends a weekly newsletter that everyone should sign up for. We prioritize your input.
Thank you. All right, this is another question for our Congress. This is about commerce. So Virginia has dropped in the most recent rankings for best state to do business. Where do you feel we should place our priorities in order to rebuild our local economy, regain our competitiveness, and how can the federal government help?
Well, Virginia is among the top states in America to do business, and that's because we worked so hard to maintain a pro-business set of policies in Richmond, say have. Well, I still sound like a state representative sometimes. We worked hard when I was there to maintain that, to keep our Right to Work Act, to make sure we kept taxes low, to make sure we kept regulations low. Unfortunately, during the last administration, what we saw was an abdication of that responsibility to keep Virginia pro-business. What we had was an increase in taxes, increases of regulations on businesses, and that has affected our ranking. Also affecting our ranking is inflation, and that is a national problem. And I'm glad I'm finally going to get to pivot to something that is on the mouths of every taxpayer and every business that I talk to, is the 8.2% inflation rate that we're seeing right now, that is a direct result of overspending by this administration in Washington due to the bills, the trillions of dollars that have been spent over the past 2 years. Just look at what's been going up. Energy costs are up 19.8%, food is up 13%, health insurance up 28%. Inflation outpaced workers' wages for 18 months in a row. That's the entire Biden administration. Real average hourly earnings decreased 3% over the last year. Average 401ks shrunk by 25%. Over 70% of workers say their pay has fallen behind. This administration and Speaker Nancy Pelosi and this House have done nothing to address inflation. My opponent hasn't put forward a solution. Energy independence is the solution, and we're going to get back to energy independence if we take the majority in November. Thank you.
Well, we compete with high-speed rural broadband and by investing in our workers. But what does that look like? Investing in educational opportunities like mentorship programs, apprenticeships, and trade schools. The trades of tomorrow are already here, and Virginia's workforce must be able to compete. The Democrats just passed the CHIPS Act to bring manufacturing back to America. And this is modern industry, working with semiconductors and other science-based tech that can provide jobs and business growth in America, but also right here in Virginia for decades to come. Business growth can be made possible with state funds and government investments as well. I'm happy to see the recent news in Waynesboro, where I live, of a custom crush wine business that will help serve local wineries. I've worked part-time at a local winery for 15 years, and I've seen the massive growth in this industry firsthand. And it's now more than a $1.7 billion a year industry. I'm a huge supporter of hemp farmers who are excited to bring their products to market. Hemp is a sustainable alternative for cotton and plastics and has many medicinal benefits. And unlike many other crops, it can be harvested 3 times a year, so family farms can make more money. Now that we have legalized marijuana, we need to think of how we can support that small business in this new industry. We need Congress to regulate big corporations that have too much power and control over our economy. They are able to dominate their industry and crush out competition of smaller businesses. These massive corporations go unregulated and are the true cost of the majority of our inflation issues. You can't blame rising prices on inflation when the CEOs are seeing record-breaking profits, while underpaying employees and overcharging customers. If elected, I'll hold big businesses accountable and never let party politics get in the way of helping our economy grow. I finally finished your question without going over.
Okay, so we're finished with the prepared questions, and now we have some questions that have been submitted by the audience. And the first question is for City Council. To kind of make it fair, we'll start with David and do the round robin this way and end with Nicholas, okay? Okay, according to the Commissioner of Revenue, 65% of the land in Lexington is exempt from property tax. 12 years ago, that figure was 52%. As a council member, what would you do to stop the erosion of the city tax base?
So fortunately, some of the properties that have recently been acquired by Washington Lee, even though they technically are not on the tax rolls, W&L does contribute over $700,000 annually to the city of Lexington that we utilize to meet our budget obligations. So that is a very, very positive attribute about Washington Lee. Additionally, some of the properties that have recently been purchased and are now used by Washington Lee have been done so by a private investor who now leases those properties. So those properties are on the tax rolls, and as that private investor invests millions of dollars, he's increasing the value of those properties, which contributes to our tax base and actually increases our tax base. Additionally, the city of Lexington has looked at the property that we have owned over the years, and that's one thing with the water tower project and also the Spotswood property. Those are pieces of property that the city of Lexington has owned for decades and have been underutilized. And the city has looked at those pieces of property to see if we can capitalize on their development potential to increase the tax base get more water and sewer customers, and really provide more housing opportunities for residents to move to the city of Lexington. And we're so appreciative of the work that happened in Richmond to allow us to acquire the VDOT property when VDOT vacated it and moved out by the Waffle House. That's an excellent piece of property in the city of Lexington with incredible development potential, and the city wants to use that for its highest and best use. It may be housing, it may be something else, but the bottom line is it's going to be on the tax rolls, it's going to contribute. Beyond that, the city of Lexington has to provide an environment where we can make sure that we are increasing our revenue from lodging taxes and meals taxes. I get that it's not part of the question about our land. However, we are very, very fortunate that some thriving businesses in town contribute greatly to those tax revenues. Thank you.
So the question was how to increase the tax base?
It's how,
The question was how to stop the erosion of the tax base.
The erosion of the tax base.
That's the way it is written, yes.
Well, I think that you've got to flip the coin on how do you increase the tax base as a strategy to decrease the erosion of it. David hit a lot of the high notes there, but again, maintaining a healthy and educated workforce that can live here, that can bring their kids here, that they can go to our schools here, spend money here, to sustain and grow our tax base is, I think, the best strategy we have before us. The VDOT property that will be developed will help, and we'll have people living here. The Spotswood property with 50-plus apartments will have people living here and eating here and dining here and bringing in friends and showing how awesome Lexington and Rockbridge County and the region is to visit and spend money and bring their tax dollars with them to help light the load that we have right now. Those strategies, I think in the long term, this is the best thing about improving the quality of life that we have here. The more money we put into getting people to come here and visit and enjoy what we have, the better it is for everybody else that's already here. Those strategies, I think, in the long term will maintain the tax base we have and grow it. The Commissioner of Revenue is correct. The 65% of the assessed value that we have, like if you took, I think W&L's land value assessment is, golly, it's crazy. It's like $100 million? No, it's BMI is very close to that. Those are significant numbers, absolutely. How do we maintain the taxable base that we have through the programs I think that we just described? Educate and keep our workforce healthy so they can afford to live here and spend money.
Colette?
Well, first of all, I think that we should talk to the citizens about how they feel about W&L starting to continuing to gobble up our land. I know weeks ago at the city council meeting, there must have been 11 people in there really pushing to put the brakes on W&L. So, number one, we should talk to the citizens about how they feel about the W&L. Number two, I personally feel that W&L should fork over more taxes. Number three, why do we have to raise and acquire more money? Why don't we cut our budget and live more simply? It's always, more. What can we have more? How can we do more? How can it be bigger? How about we downsize? How about we rehabilitate buildings? How about we work together and be creative about how to cut our expenses, especially at this point in time when we're in such an economic nightmare and there's no end in sight, except hopefully in January it's going to start turning around. Thank you.
So that 65% is actually the most in the Commonwealth of Virginia of any locality, which which is, somewhat shocking. I think one way that we can try to maintain our tax base and grow our tax base, it has already been said, we need to increase our tax base, through workforce development and also through, business growth. But additionally, I think one thing that I don't know if it's been quite touched upon is we need to have conversations with the stakeholders. Ms. Berry-Reck did mention citizens, but we also need to have conversations with the institutions. What's good for the institutions is also good for the city of Lexington in some respects. The institutions need good schools for their faculty, children to go to. The institutions need functional roads for people to travel, whether it's employees or students. So really, one way to stop the erosion is to have a conversation and say, hey, we need a certain amount of taxable property in the city to maintain infrastructure. And to kind of continue on that, when I was on planning commission, we had a discussion regarding some of the properties in the triangle. W&L owns those properties, and they were thinking about knocking them down. And but I brought up the point that that's good. There's limited housing. Where are the folks going to live? And W&L took the comments of the citizens. They took comments that I like to think that I helped contribute, and they revised their plan. And they did not knock those houses down. And there's more places for people to live here now. So I think that having a conversation is one of the best ways to kind of maintain harmony in the city and to have synergy so that we can develop Lexington to a place we all love to live in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, this question is for you all. The cost of college has been increasing at a much higher rate than the rate of inflation, and young people are disproportionately paying the price by having to take out student loans. What would you do to slow down the increase of tuition rates if you were elected to Congress?
Yeah, student debt is a huge problem. I'm still paying back my student loans. My husband and I, between our 2 student loans, it's almost $600 a month that we're spending in student loans. So when you think of what could we do with $600 a month if we didn't have to pay those loans back, or if they were just a little bit lower. I'm excited about these programs coming out with the Biden administration of canceling student debt. I'm excited as a mental health worker for, there's different avenues that you can get your loans decreased by being a mental health worker, being a teacher, being a police officer, all of those kind of things depending on your job. And if you're going to an industry that is lacking in professionals, you can get your student loans decreased that way. So I think one of the ways is continuing to support student loan forgiveness, and especially geared towards these professions and these industries that we're talking about having such job shortages, such lack of professions in the mental health field, in the healthcare profession. Even our teachers are quitting and leaving the education field. So I think if we can start off with those professions that, again, are short-staffed as it is, having a program allowing for some student debt relief in those high-needed professions would be a great place to start.
The cost of college is out of control, and we need to take comprehensive action to encourage those universities to control their costs. What we're seeing is an explosion on the administrative side. Faculty rates are staying fairly static, while the creation of new assistant deans for a variety of purposes has taken hold and has increased tuition costs. One of the problems is that about 10 years ago, under Democratic leadership, we shifted oversight and over the lending process from the private sector to the public sector. And when that happened, it sent a signal to the colleges and universities that they can charge as much as they want because the government will back as much as you can borrow. And so you were encouraged to borrow more and more because you knew that the government would back it and the colleges went right along with it. So we have to get back to a time when the private sector has a role to play in this process to make sure that people borrowing money are actually being responsible when they take out these loans, looking at future employment, how much they're going to be earning, but also making sure that there's a stake in the game for the universities, because if the universities have a stake in backing the loans or supporting the loans that are taken out by their students, they're going to make sure that they are actually getting the education that they need to get the job to pay back the loan. So we just had my higher education roundtable today, where we convene all of the presidents of the universities and colleges in the 6th district. We've met at Blue Ridge Community College. Community colleges are a big part of that because the workforce is critical, and our future workforce, training that future workforce, is not just about colleges and four-year universities. It's about those getting technical degrees as well. Thank you.
Okay, we will return over here to, thank you. We will return over here to City Council. So one of the things that you all have kind of touched on, we've touched on affordable housing, we've touched on bringing, increasing the workforce here. One of you mentioned bringing better paying jobs so that people can afford better houses and things like that. One thing that has not been mentioned that is critical to the workforce is childcare. I think you did mention it in regards to the why. But for people who are struggling in Lexington to be here and to live and to work, and specifically around childcare, what are your plans to bring better childcare and better paying jobs to be able to afford the childcare to the city of Lexington? And we'll start back here with you, Colette.
That's a hard question. And being a homeschooling mom, living on pennies while we did it, childcare is way out there for me. But it seems to me with what is happening in too many of our schools that more and more people are pulling their children out of schools and creating co-ops where they can do childcare, where they can do homeschooling. I'm actually hoping to start one myself with my daughter who's homeschooling, and I was amazed when she was looking for a homeschool co-op, how many had popped up in just this local area. So I would really have to think hard about how to do that, because I believe that the mother's place is in the home, and I sacrificed a lot to stay at home. I could have had a major career, but the children always came first. So I'm not really sure how I would handle that in terms of the money and creating jobs to have the childcare and all that, because honestly, I'm not really a businesswoman. I am a human services person, and so I would really have to sit down and pray and talk to moms looking for childcare to come up with some creative ideas. But I know as women that we could do it. We can pull together, we can live on pennies in order to support our children.
One thing we could consider doing is looking at expanding early childhood education, potentially in our public schools, and see if that's something that we can try to do. Children learn so much in the early years of life, and I can tell you, years ago, it was in a different county, but I substitute taught on like the first week of kindergarten, and it was amazing. Some kids could read, and some kids didn't know the color board. So I think it's really important if we could try to give kids, some type of education earlier in life and help do that through the public school system. If we could maybe have pre-K, if we could find somewhere in the city budget to help folks out, subsidize folks maybe that are low income, and find a way to get kids an education earlier on in life. Because it's so important, because the gap, in learning can happen so quickly, and by the time, a child gets to kindergarten, they might not, they might be way behind their peers. And that doesn't just have effects on the individual, it doesn't just have effects on the family, it has effects on the community as a whole. It's really important that, our tests, to get our test scores up, to increase innovation, to increase productivity, we gotta have a competent workforce, and we gotta have an innovative workforce. And to have an innovative workforce, we gotta get kids an education earlier on. And so I think that if Lexington can find a way to help maybe start, some pre-K type programs or something like that in the elementary school here, I think that'll go a long way towards helping us be successful in the future. Thank you very much.
I agree, child care issues are incredibly challenging for young families, and those challenges exist for both the mother and the father. And I, for one, want to just put it out there publicly how incredibly proud I am of my wife that works outside the home and has significantly more education than I do. My wife, when we met at the Palms, she was an elementary school teacher in the city of Lexington. And then, while teaching elementary school, she drove 3 nights a week to Hollins to get her master's degree. And then early on in our marriage, she decided to go back to UVA full-time to get her PhD. And now she's a college professor. She defended her dissertation 9 months pregnant. And at graduation, our newborn was there. My wife, the example that my wife is providing to my 2 daughters of being ambitious, successful, and the breadwinner in our household will take my kids so far, my 2 daughters. I mentioned earlier I have a 14-year-old. I have a 9-year-old. We parent them together. It has been one of my responsibilities for all 14 years. I take the kids to school. I do that. I get a little bit of time with them. And of course, we both have juggled picking them up from school, taking them to practices. So we co-parent. And if I'm on city council, there will be times I'm late to a meeting because I'm with my kids or because I'm responsible for getting them someplace. So I just want to put that out there. If you elect me, you get my kids also. But as far as childcare, I think I highlighted the importance that I put on the YMCA. We also have Yellow Brick Road that is right over here that has an incredible role in the city of Lexington. We have Woods Creek Montessori, we have Earth Song Montessori, and we have lots of caregivers in their homes that provide incredible services to moms and dads.
Well, like David, I married way up. My wife was getting her PhD in 1997. She went through tenure at Tug when she was pregnant. And I can tell you, 25 years ago, that was not exactly supported. So, between the 2 of us, we have co-parented our kids. We have 2 successful children. One just got a job. I'm sorry if I digress. We got a job in Seattle. I'm going to talk about affordable housing. A studio apartment in Seattle, Washington is $2,000 a month. You want to talk about shock? Anyhow, we're getting that figured out. But when we look at the successful programs that we have here, like Yellow Brick Road, like Montessori, like private homes that are doing in-home child care, that were part of our childcare when we had our kids that weren't ready for school yet as a result. I mean, I brought my kids into my store downtown every day and walked around with one of them on my chest while I'm trying to sell wine to customers. We can build on the success that we have now, especially what the Y is doing right now. What are they doing right? How can we do it broader for everybody that needs that help? And I think we can do it because we have a great model, we have great success, we have a great community here that can make that happen.
Okay, I think we have, thank you all. We have time for one more question, and this will be finishing you all up. Everybody reads about Medicare being at risk and in a lot of different ways. What do you feel like the federal government needs to do to assure Medicare, as I look around this room, here's your Medicare audience or soon to be Medicare audience. So what can be done about Medicare?
Well, that is the big question, and it has to do with the success of our entitlement programs and how to make them sustainable into the future. Medicare, which is providing health care for millions of elderly Americans, is a cornerstone of the program. We have to make it sustainable beyond the date at which it is going to become insolvent, which is in the next decade. And the spending that's gone on in the past 2 years has not helped things. It has made the share of the budget that is interest on the debt, which has surpassed $30 trillion, larger and larger, and it is pushing more and more on our entitlement programs, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, all of which are approaching insolvency unless we take action. We have no leadership from the House, we have no leadership from the Senate, we have no leadership from the White House. So it will be incumbent upon the new majority, if the Republicans take the majority in November, to put forward a plan. And we have to make sure that we continue the plan, continue the system that was presented to you all as you were working and preparing for that system. Because it would not be fair to today's seniors to change the program because you all were saving based on what you were expecting to receive from Medicare, from Social Security, from Medicaid over your lifetimes. My girls, I'm going to brag on my wife a little bit, got her PhD and said, I think I'll go back to law school. So she has her PhD and then she got her law degree from Washington and Lake. We have twin daughters, they're teenagers in training. Medicare will not be the same for them as it is currently. But we must make sure that it exists for them when they are seniors as well, and I will fight to make that happen.
I'm excited that we just passed, the Democrats passed legislation that allows Medicare finally to be able to negotiate drug prices. Before that wasn't allowed. I support expanded and improved Medicare for all. We cannot have anybody in this country be without health care and access to health care, whether it's preventative, ongoing, and again, mental health, as we've talked so much about tonight. We are the richest country in this world, and for anybody to not have access to health care is completely inexcusable. To suffer when there's treatments out there, again, is inexcusable. I don't understand how anybody in this audience or anybody listening cannot agree that everyone deserves health care, that health care is a right for everyone in this country. So again, I support expanded and improved Medicare for all.
Thank you. And thank you, and thank all of you. I'm going to invite our Chamber Board President. Where is she? There she is.
Hard to see.
Yeah, and who also is the leader of this Y that everybody has been talking about, in case you didn't know, sorry. But she is here as our board president of the Chamber of Commerce, Bobby Wagner.
Hello. Thank you guys for being here. We live in an awesome community with a group of very caring and committed citizens, and it's so great to come out and see all you faces tonight. So I do need to say thank you to several folks. First and foremost, thank you to the Hampton Call Auto for hosting us this evening. We appreciate it. Super shout out to Albert Vargas, standing in the back. He deserves a round of applause. He is leading our Performance Relations Committee, which has put in all the work to make this evening happen. And thank you to our Chamber Board of Directors, all of you chamber members that we see out there this evening. I will not list all of these for the sake of time, but you all have a program hopefully in your hands, or you've seen it this evening, and there's a list of businesses on the back. Please look at these businesses, because these businesses support other businesses in our community because they support our chamber. And that's a really special thing to see this. So thank you to all those businesses out there, and last but not least, thank you to Chuck, David, Nicholas, Colette, Jennifer, and Ben Klein for being here this evening. We appreciate it.